This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on a choice, but to get on mandate. Get it on. Welcome to the best hour so in the universe. It's Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. It's Mark Garrigus in New York City.
New York City with a, by the way, after all those people tweeting at us about our fidelity, Gary and Lucas, I think, have hooked me up with this new microphone thing. So we'll see if our fidelity is better.
Good. Freshly shorn, you get a new haircut?
Got a new haircut, trimmed up a little bit, did a couple of court hearings this morning, got another hearing after this. It's quite a busy week this week, don't you think?
Well, I realize if you're busy, every week is busy, and if you're not busy, then none of the weeks are busy.
Well, I've got to say that 2 years ago, I thought I was going to slow down, and I've had the opposite. I'm busier than I've ever been. I mean, not the least of which is because, to my mind, there seems to be nothing but government overreach everywhere I go. So nothing boils me more than that.
Yeah, it seems like it's really kicked into high gear over the last couple of years. And it's interesting to me that the crew that was always talking about Trump and Trump being a dictator and his overreach and all that was going on in the government under his administration, I feel like that crew has kicked it up a notch now that Trump is gone in the regulatory overreach department. Does it feel that way to you?
I don't understand what's happening in the regulatory overreach. I mean, I've got your friend over at Tin Horn Flats, where they're sending out health inspectors practically every day, monkeying around with them. There's the gym owner next door here in New Jersey, which I don't understand. They've got the criminal search warrants are being executed on people, all for people basically trying to make a living, which, it's okay. Apparently, as we speak, I think they're trying to reconcile a $1.9 trillion Senate passing of a budget for coronavirus relief. And I mean, people under the numbers just get so crazy, but $1.9 trillion because we have basically crippled ourselves. And now we have to fight to get money back into the economy. I don't know. I mean, there's a schizophrenia that I don't get.
Well, it's an interesting paradigm here, which is the people, whether it's you or me, the Tin Horn Flats, Attila Gym, I'm trying to think of what the name of the gym is. The point is this. The folks that are fighting tooth and nail to stay off the dole, the people that are saying, I think I know how to run a business, I think I know how to run it safely, I would like to keep my employees, I would like to keep everyone paid. Attila's is the name of the gym in New Jersey. All these folks are saying, I would like to not take the government's money. The government is printing money they don't have, and there's a handful of Americans that are saying, I'm going to take it upon myself to keep my business running, keep my employees fed, and stay up and running during the pandemic safely. And those people are being attacked by not only the government, but the people at large as well. I would make I would say that's a much more American activity than shutting it down, telling all your employees to go home and pound sand and wait around for the federal government to send you a stipend.
Well, I noticed besides Tin Horn Flats, who the city of Burbank now wants to declare them a nuisance. The county is suing them, is suing another place called Barley and Bread, and suing a place called Cronies. They're actually suing the people so that they have to go out, get lawyers. I mean, and at the same time, by the way, depending on where you are, I noticed another thing, which has been kind of a bet noir. Now they want to do hero pay and tack on money onto the minimum hourly, which, I understand, but the problem when you mandate it is you get exactly what ends up doing. Long Beach passed a hero pay for an additional $4 an hour. You know what Kroger did in response? They just said, we're going to close the Ralphs, we're going to close Food for Less, and that's 25% of the stores in the city of Long Beach. Maybe they're bluffing. Maybe it's a negotiation tactic. Look, if the markets were making so much money, I can tell you this, if you're making so much money that you could pay your employees, one would hope you would pay your employees. But if the market's reaction is, this seems to me to be a fairly logical argument. By the way, the constitutionality of this, where you target the grocery store, is beyond me. I don't know how they think that's going to be. These days, anything is past muster. The Constitution has been suspended and nobody really cares. But understand that if they're saying in response to that, we've calculated the additional delta of that amount of money, which isn't that much, and God knows it's tough to live on that, but if the market's calculated and says we can't make a living, so we're going to just shut it down, what does that tell you?
Well, this is a very interesting point because this is a kind of local story that's gone national. So Kroger, I guess, is the parent company of Ralph's, maybe Food for Less. They're the parent company. So in Long Beach, they mandated that a couple of stores start paying their employees an extra $4 an hour as hero pay. I would kind of argue that if the government wants these employees to have another $4 an hour, then the government should pay them another $4 an hour, not the store owner. But I don't like the mandate and the overreach of the government and the destruction of the Constitution. But the argument is, by the advocates, these stores, these entities, they're making record profits. They can afford it, so on and so forth. And why don't they pay their employees another $4 an hour if, in fact, they're making record profits and they can afford it? The stores are pushing back and saying, yeah, we're making a lot of profits, but a lot of that money's going into mitigation and all the stuff that we need to do to be COVID compliant. So now we get down to this argument. Now, Kroger says those stores were underperforming anyway, and now we're going to. So a couple things. It's a little disingenuous to say Kroger as an entity is making a whole bunch of money. It's kind of as if you said, Starbucks has 3,000 locations, but the one in the Burbank airport isn't doing well. And then the Burbank government says, we now demand that you pay the employees of the Burbank airport Starbucks an extra $4 an hour. And the parent company goes, fuck it, close that one. It wasn't making money anyway. That doesn't mean Starbucks isn't making money, but you owe it. If you're a publicly traded company, you owe it to your constituency. You owe it to the shareholders. So there's two things that are going on. Either those two outlets, those Kroger stores, weren't making money anyway, so it was an easy decision for Kroger, or they were making money, Kroger could afford it, and Kroger saying, fuck you to the government. This is a slippery slope because what's next? All right, you've just decreed that we pay our employees an extra $4 an hour. When is that going national? What's next after the pandemic? How does this work with the government?
Well, it's interesting. I see where the California Grocers Association filed a lawsuit in the Central District. They're challenging the ordinance, and they're saying that it only targets grocery stores and pharmacies and doesn't discuss other essential jobs like public safety, transportation, and restaurants, which I think is an argument that's got a lot of traction. And by the way, I'm kind of the mindset, if you're going to start targeting specific industries, then you've got to, I think, put your money where your mouth is. As you say, you've got to let that be where the government is going to shovel the money, because you're saying they're frontline workers. We need the grocery store, so do it. So why wouldn't Why wouldn't the government have to pay if they're mandating it? I don't think that they're making as much money at these stores that are being targeted. And it just strikes me as you said, I always hate the parade of horribles, but in this case, there seems to be this feeding frenzy in going on with people thinking that you can just suspend the Constitution, due process, equal protection, if you like the idea. If you like the idea, then it doesn't, I mean, it goes for free speech, goes for other things, but equal protection is what it means. That's what we are as a country, is that we protect people and property interests equally. Well, and we don't seem to be doing it.
LA City Council's working on its own similar grocery store measure at $5 an hour because they're not going to be outdone by lowly Long Beach. And yes, it is. I don't like being the slippery slope guy, but if the government can start deciding, hey, that guy in the corner office, he's making 50 times as much as the guy on the factory floor, we're going to mandate that guy in the corner office who may have started the business or taken revenues up 100% since he took on the CEO job 4 years ago, we're going to start mandating that guy not make more than 30 times whatever. This is getting into some very slippery territory when the government starts getting involved with how much employers pay the employees.
Yeah, and I don't know how you can mandate it in those situations if it's private enterprise, because that also is a dangerous. I understand the argument that if you're taking federal funds, or if you have, for instance, a federal or a state contract, that they're, part of the trade-off, so to speak, is you have to comply. I mean, that's always been the law on these things where there's prevailing wage, for instance, is you have to pay a prevailing wage if, in fact, you're going to do the contract. So you build it into the contractual kind of what your profits are, what your costs are, and the revenue is. And then you say, either I'm going to do it or I'm not going to do it. I understand that because that's a negotiation where both sides are making calculations. The public entity is saying, I'm going to calculate what kind of policy I want to institute. And if you as a private contractor is saying, I want the public job, so to speak, these are the things I've got to do in order to get the work. But if you're wholly a private enterprise that is not getting or contracting with a public entity, I have a harder time understanding the argument.
Well, but if you look at the federally mandated minimum wage, if you look at the feds going with a national minimum wage or bumping it up to $15 an hour, that does lay the groundwork for this kind of stuff, because you could have a small gardening crew. You could be paying your laborers minimum wage. When the federal government gets involved and says, no, we will tell you what to pay your laborers on your crew, then that is essentially what we're talking about with Kroger. It's just the feds basically saying, here's our decree, small business, medium or large business, this is what you shall comply. Now, so
it's interesting. So I think, and I'm speculating here, I noticed, and I don't know where it'll end up by the time this drops, but in the coronavirus bill that was apparently got out of the Senate with the vice president casting the deciding vote. So it was an even 50-50 split, Democrats versus Republicans. I'm going to bet that the only reason that they got the 50 votes to pass the bill is that the senator from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, must have insisted that they strip the $15 an hour provision out of it in order for him to vote. Otherwise, it would not have passed. And because I was wondering yesterday why all of a sudden it was in there, that was a centerpiece of the legislation, then all of a sudden it was put out. And it's interesting that West Virginia and apparently the constituency for Joe Manchin as being a senator from there felt it strongly enough to strip it out nationally, which then brings you back to kind of the larger argument about, are there disproportionate influences from the smaller states in the way the Senate is set up? But that's a whole other discussion.
I don't know why the federally mandated minimum wage doesn't factor in the difference between living in New York at $15 an hour and living in Mississippi for $15 an hour. It seems patently insane if anyone who's lived in San Francisco or in New York City or places like that, $15 is, I don't know. If you're in Mississippi and you make $15 an hour, it's probably like making $35 an hour in New York City or in San Francisco. Also, what I've figured out when I was going in San Francisco, walking along the Fisherman's Wharf, there's an In-N-Out burger that's right on the wharf in San Francisco, and they had a sign out that said hiring, and it was like $18 an hour. Now, because if you are in the city of San Francisco, that's what it's going to take to get someone to work at your In-N-Out burger. You go to Louisiana and you put $18 an hour out in front of your burger joint, and you're going to have a line going around the block.
You know, it's true. I find also that there is something to be said for the amount of pay and the quality of the worker. I mean, there is it's besides geographical, it appears that you get at least my experience, I don't know, you have the same thing. Do you find that people who get paid more, or if you pay more, you tend to attract a better quality applicant, so to speak?
Yeah, I do think in general that's true. But if you just make the floor $15 an hour, then you're going to get whoever the shitty employee was at $9 an hour. They'll just be getting $15 an hour. Also, the one thing that they don't ever really talk about with the minimum wage is if you take the minimum wage and you raise it up to $15 an hour, you employed a bunch of guys that were making $18 or $19 an hour who are pretty satisfied that they're making twice the minimum wage. You're now going to have a bunch of miserable, disgruntled employees because they're now just making 15% more than literally a kid out of high school with a GED would be making at a McDonald's. You know, they don't really talk about that part where if you have some guys with some skill and some experience and you're paying them $20 an hour and their jack-off nephew who just quit high school can go to an Arby's and make almost essentially what this guy could make, who may have maybe a skilled fill in the blank. Now that guy's going to go, well, fuck this. If my retard cousin's going to make $15 an hour and I've been at this job for 20 years or 15 years or whatever it is, I'm getting $21 an hour. I want $30 an hour. I mean, it all becomes relative, right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, it's exactly right.
What are they talking about with tip? They're even talking about with restaurant servers and stuff, right? The ones who get tips.
And this is another thing. I think that the back of the house, I've always wondered
in a restaurant.
In a restaurant. I've always wondered, because there are jurisdictions, I think Rhode Island is one, where the minimum wage goes down if you're getting tips. And so that the interesting thing is generally you're hard pressed to find servers who are declaring the tips. It's an amazing thing. When the tips are on the credit card, they get declared. When the tips are in cash, for some reason they don't get declared. I don't know why that phenomena is. You have an explanation for that? It's
couldn't
shocking,
begin.
right?
I have a vivid imagination, and I couldn't even begin to cobble together a theory.
It's so much fun, I'll tell you. So, I've been fascinated also this week with the impeachment because they filed this week, the House managers filed their response, a fairly detailed response. The lawyers who are representing Trump have filed what was a much less or a robust yet more streamlined response. Mm-hmm. Trump has declined the invitation to testify under oath. And I suspect the reason why is that they are telling him, his lawyers are telling him that why would you ever testify under oath as long as you didn't pardon yourself or step down and have Pence pardon you? And why would you put yourself in harm's way unnecessarily when you're not in charge of the DOJ anymore and when there's other state prosecutors who may be looking at you? The interesting thing about this constitutionality argument, where they voted, 45 Republicans voted that it was unconstitutional to try a president who's no longer in office. If I'm not mistaken, there have been trials of impeachment of federal officials who were no longer in office, who refused to resign. So I don't know, but the only way to test that is if there's a conviction, obviously, or there's some penalty. For instance, if they were to convict and then with a majority vote that Trump couldn't hold office again, then you'd be able to test that. But I don't think that we're ever going to get an answer to this on the constitutionality question.
On that subject, I heard on the ride in that there was some pending litigation about trying to take some of the Trump attorneys and get them disbarred.
Right. And also, my friend Lynn Wood is apparently being investigated for illegally voting in Georgia. I don't know what that's all about, but, this week has been a bad week if you're a former lawyer or a lawyer for the former president. I mean, the Smartmatic has sued, I think, Fox News, Gene Piero, Sidney Powell, and Rudy Giuliani for billions of dollars. And boy, would I love to have a front row seat to some of the motion hearings in that case, right?
Well, in a way, and I think probably you could add the MyPillow guy in that group too. I think if you're Lynn Wood, who represented Nicholas Sandmann, I think your same argument almost could be used against you now. Like, hey, you took this person, didn't do anything, and you went out and you started running all these news reports and flapping your gums about how this kid was wrong and a racist and xenophobic and everything, and now you got to pay the fiddler. And I think you could say the same thing about the voting machine. If you manufacture the technology or the software, whatever, you're involved with that company, and Lynn Wood and company are out flapping their gums about how your product is bogus and it can be hacked and it was compromised, then in a weird way, you could kind of make the same Lynn Wood argument for Nick Sandmann against Lynn Wood in the voting machines.
I understand, and had talked about that very thing this morning with a friend while we were waiting to do a hearing. And then I asked him, because I don't think they've sued Lynn yet. And I thought that was an interesting thing. Sidney Powell got sued. Maybe Gary can double check and see it. I saw where Sidney Powell got sued. I saw where Rudy got sued, and the various Fox News hosts, and I believe Fox News itself. But I had not seen, and I assume Mike Lindell is going to, that's a deep pocket there. The MyPillow guy. MyPillow guy has got some real exposure. I mean, there's some of the theories he was espousing. I think he's got a real problem there, and he kind of forced himself into the public figure arena. So there's arguments there, as for defamation. But the interesting thing will be is whether or not I have my doubts as to Sidney Powell being a deep pocket. Maybe she's got an insurance policy. I have my doubts as to Rudy Giuliani having a deep pocket, but obviously Fox News does, and the My Pillow guy does.
Well, My Pillow guy,
as of now, Lynn Wood has not been named.
Which is interesting. I mean, I guess that's interesting. I haven't talked to Lynn since that time, Gary, that you and I talked to him I forget when it was.
It was right after
since.
It was right after the Sandman thing when we were trying to get him on.
So you were talking about Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy. I think he was on an episode of Take a Knee or something. I've interviewed the guy before. He has a very positive story from being a drug addict to getting clean and starting My Pillow.
Take a Knee 224 if you're interested.
Take a Knee 224. So
how long ago was that?
God, 2 years.
April 2019.
April
Wow.
2019. Okay, so now the question,
that's a Corolla classic that should be rerun.
You were talking about him being a public figure. You could argue he's a public figure. So is there less exposure if you're a public figure because you get to comment on things as a public figure?
Well, the public figure gives you there are certain hurdles, so to speak, for defamation, and public figure will raise the hurdles, the malice being one of them. But here, I think Smartmatic and Dominion, who's also previously sued, would say that the malice is apparent. They were trying to do damage by the statements. I think that's they were trying to get people to believe with malice that these statements about this were true, and that whether or not, and then there's going to be an argument, did they give them the opportunity to clear it up? Or then you may have the argument, and it can be a compelling argument. Did they, what did they believe? What did they honestly, in good faith, believe? Did they believe what they were saying, or did they not? Going back to your CNN example, when CNN was doing it, did they know at the time it was false and they were doubling down, or was there was there some other agenda or motivation?
How do you, though, prove malice if I say I'm a big fan of Gary? Gary lost the election. I think there's something wrong with those election machines. That's me being a champion of Gary. Now, the election machines are getting thrown under the bus while I champion Gary, but I don't know if that's the definition of malice, because they're being included as a reason why Gary lost the election, but that's not, I don't know if that fits the definition of malice.
I think it's, I think malice, like pornography, is it when you see it, to some degree, the old expression. But these things are all extremely textured and nuanced in the law, and there's decisions that are seemingly irreconcilable at times as to how to define it, what it really means. Malice, for instance, for malicious mischief is different than malice for premeditated murder, which can be different for malice in a civil proceeding. I mean, you can have all different definitions of malice that have, for malicious mischief, it can be to vex, annoy, or harass. For murder, it can be a much more heightened standard, a cold, malignant heart. For in the civil context, it can be something wholly different, and in between there, if you're ranking it in gradations. So it's very difficult. The interesting thing that I noticed was, I think that the lawyers who were bringing the case for Smartmatic, Gary can find this, I believe I read that they're the same lawyers who sued ABC for the pink slime thing that they did. And I believe that case settled for a substantial 9-figure amount. I mean, it was not insubstantial.
What was the pink slime?
Pink slime was there was an ABC investigative piece. And I believe, Gary, if he pulls it up, can tell me, I think they were talking about the beef byproducts. And there was demonstrably, apparently, false. And the damage model showed that it cost the industry a fortune. And I believe this was the same set of lawyers.
ABC,
there you go, Gary.
settled pink slime lawsuit for $177 million, leaving the beef company feeling vindicated. In a way, in a weird way, it's kind of like the old Oprah, Dr. Phil trial when the beef industry went up against Oprah. What about schools reopening? Every day that goes by, I now feel that more and more people that used to be on the side of lock it down, shut it down, and throw away the key, even the most progressive of mayors, like your Lori Lightfoots of Chicago, more and more voices from the left are saying, come on, we need to reopen these schools. Still nothing in California or LA.
Well, no, I think, Gary, what's the name of the LA city councilman? I think he did a press conference yesterday. I think it's Tom, got a blank on his name, said that
LaBonge.
he was...
No, LaBonge just died.
No,
Didn't LaBonge just die?
Yeah.
Might have. Yeah.
It's probably not the guy who's been dead for 7 weeks.
Tom.
Although he'd be an upgrade to Barbara Ferrer. Barbara, we're going to use Tom LaBonge's corpse to conduct this one. We just don't feel like you've been effective. And
Gary,
who's to say she's alive anyway? I'm not so sure she's alive. Sorry.
Gary, what's the name of the city councilman? He just said yesterday he was going to take some action against LAUSD. I mean, if you can believe that the LA City Council is fed up. His name, one councilman.
His name's Joe, and I think it's Busciano.
Oh, Joe Busciano. Yeah. So,
and he came out yesterday, and you're now seeing. I'm telling you, it's amazing what it takes for people to realize. People were asking, why are we talking about restaurants for every week for 4 or 5 weeks? Because there's certain tipping points. Restaurant outdoor dining was one of the tipping points. Schools, as you have been saying for the last 2 weeks, is a tipping point. Anybody who's got school-age children who see the damage that is happening here, when in the face of what seems to be no compelling reason to keep the kids out of school whatsoever. I mean, what is the argument for keeping the kids out of school if you're not just deciding to be pandered to? All of the evidence and data, and God forbid anybody ever look at the evidence or the data, shows that that's not a vector of transmission.
Well, a couple things, a whole bunch to get into. One is, I just talked to my son last night. I basically told him, look, I got to start teaching how to box or something. You got to get it. You got to get out. You got to socialize. These kids have been shut down for a year. And, if we were shut down for a year when we were 14 years of age, I would have had no choice but to be outside wrestling with my friends the entire time, because I lived on a service porch with no air conditioning, right? And I didn't have, forget about cable TV, I didn't have a TV in my room. I didn't have video games. I had nothing. So what is it that I would have done in my room? Well, today's child has got the central air, got the computer, got the video games, got the flat panel TV. A lot of these kids are just hunkered down in the room, and the paranoid moms aren't letting, because they've been spoon-fed all the doom and gloom by the media, not spoon-fed the truth, which is their young 14-year-old sons are in little to no danger from this disease whatsoever. Worry about your 89-year-old mom. she's in danger. Your kid's not. The moms aren't doing the math. They're not letting the sons get out and play and be together. And it's going to be kind of a mass depression. You've removed a year. We're coming up to a year. So CDC has done the crunch the numbers. It is safe. This notion of, well, we're not going back until the teachers are vaccinated and the kids are vaccinated. We don't even have a vaccination for kids. That stuff is not even approved for kids under 8 years old. So you're not going to be able to vaccinate all the kids. Everyone at Trader Joe's and everyone at the gas station and everyone in every other facet of life is essentially back to work. I could make an argument that school teachers were essential workers probably before I could make it for many other folks that have been back to work for a year. So what are we doing? Now you have the governor. Now you have the mayor. Now you have the city council wanting them to go back to work. This, to me, is this should be a point where people think about breaking up unions, just like Ronald Reagan did with the air traffic controllers. You cannot, as a union, just unilaterally decide to do something that goes against science and shuts down a society.
Well, there's also contrasted, we've talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and look, the LA Times finally did an article on it today. But the most dangerous, and I've said this repeatedly, the most dangerous place of all, if you understand what this disease is, are the courthouses of LA County. The courthouses bring together thousands of people, hundreds if not thousands of people daily, are some of the poorest constructed, least ventilated areas you could find indoors. You keep people there for hours on end for literally, especially in the civil courthouse, absolutely no reason whatsoever. And look what happened. The interpreters are dying. People are dying who work in the courts. That's the criminal courts building right there. You can't find a worse ventilated building if your life depended on it.
Well, they had the bubonic plague going on over there before COVID. So this may be a step toward the light for them.
I don't understand it. And you get, you can very easily, I did it this morning. You can do WebEx style Zoom LA, they call it LA Court Connect in the civil courthouse. You can do that. Why are there any hearings going on in person in the courts? Why are people having to be dragged down there to defend evictions, for instance, in this in one of these articles? Why are people having to defend in person anything but a criminal case? I mean, a criminal case, you've got the right, a constitutional right, to confront your accuser. But the Chief Justice has, by virtue of the delegation of her emergency powers, declared a judicial emergency. Speedy trial doesn't play any anymore. So what is going on and why? Why are these things happening? Explain to me why the courts are afraid to enforce things that are rational at the same time where they are the hotbeds of irrationality.
Well, what about it? If the teachers' unions have basically, I mean, I don't know, maybe I would use monopoly type arguments. The teachers' unions have a monopoly on education in Los Angeles. We don't have a lot of choice when it comes to school. So if they unilaterally decide we're not going back into the classroom and they just say, because we have deemed it unsafe. And you could hit them just like we talked about with the outdoor dining a few months ago. Look, once you take a group and they make a declaration and they say no outdoor dining because it's unsafe or no going back into the classrooms because it's unsafe, and then you hit them with reams of documents showing that it is safe and they can make no cogent argument as to why it isn't safe, then at a certain point, what are we to do?
I understand. That's exactly the frustration is that there is no compelling argument for there to be no school. I mean, LAUSD, I mean, years ago, I had Rafe Esquith, who was one of the great teachers they've ever had. And we had to sue to get him out of teacher jail. And, you would think, why does Rafe Esquith, who's one of the greatest teachers LAUSD has ever had, why does he have to go to an outside lawyer, me, to sue LAUSD, the school district, in order to get him out of teacher jail? I mean, there was actually something called teacher jail. And I marveled at how the union could be so hardcore in certain areas and then just basically roll over in others. I mean, if the true kind of role of the union is to advocate for the teachers, and if you really believe that the teachers union was looking out for teachers, how would they ever allow a teacher jail? I mean, you know what I mean? Where you have to go report and you're banished there because of some Mickey Mouse accusation and you get no due process. It's mind-boggling to me. And so now you've got a teachers union, which apparently, in the face of a complete dearth of evidence, is apparently, I don't understand any other reason for it. There's a complete dearth of evidence that this is a hotbed vector of transmission. Whereas on the opposite, you have, beyond any shadow of a doubt, the fact that courthouses are, or that forcing people indoors are. The idea that the county health department, in their infinite wisdom, says you can't show TVs outside, and you know why they did this. They're not saying it, they're not admitting it, but they don't want people watching the Super Bowl outside. So what is that going to do? That's just going to force people to expand their indoor Super Bowl parties, and they're going to say, oh, well, that's, we're telling people not to do that either. I mean, it's just the idiocy. This is really kind of exposed, to my mind, what has happened here, that the fact that the people who govern us have outsourced all their decision-making to county health officials who have no idea what they're doing, and resemble people who just think it's almost a patronizing view of those who are the subjects. The patronization is they're too dumb to understand what we're doing, so we won't really explain it, and instead we're going to just do kind of the symbolic gestures to get to a place or a zone that we want to be in.
So a couple things. I'm going to keep circling back to it. What do we do with the teachers' unions? Let's just say if they say we're never going back. Because here's the timeline we're on now is if they go back, we're at the end of the school season just about. I mean, if they went back tomorrow, there wouldn't be that much of the school year left. But they're not coming back tomorrow. If they come back in May, it's done. So the year is now complete. So at what point does Biden go full Reagan with the air traffic controllers, or does Newsom defy the people that are contributing most to him, which are the teachers' unions, and say, by decree, you must all go back, Monday the 15th? Where are we?
There's at a certain point, it used to be that in California, the reason you could never get criminal justice reform done, for instance, was because the largest PAC contributor was the correctional officers union. And always, you take a look at the amounts of money that were contributed, and it would be the correctional officers. And that's why you could never get anything done in that state of California, which is supposedly progressive. Now you've got as you said, you've got one of the largest contributors is the teachers union. And at a certain point, some judge is going to have to be brave enough to grant an order, and then it's going to have to make its way through the Court of Appeal, which is the next level of review, because what has happened, like happened with the county, that Superior Court Judge Chalfant, who ruled on the outdoor dining, was prescient. You go back and read what he wrote back in December. I mean, spot on. But the Court of Appeal instantly issued a stay order. In fact, we argue the case in front of the Court of Appeal next week. The same thing is going to have to happen for schools. Somebody's going to have to bring an action and hold them, do what's called an order to show cause for the district to show why they're not open. They can't just sit there and say, throw their hands up. I mean, it's a fundamental function of government, not only to protect you, the health and safety, but at the same time to educate the populace.
Can Newsom demand that they go back if he wanted? Can the governor do that?
Yes, I think at this point he can do. Look, he's not being held accountable in any way, shape, or form. He hasn't complied with the Administrative Procedures Act. He hasn't complied with any kinds of code sections or anything else. He's delegated out authority. Nobody has said the emperor's got no clothes, or in this case, the emperor's got no legal authority. So if he can do what I consider to violate code section after code section and what the law has always been up until this, then why can't he do the same and just decree schools should be open as of next week? What is the problem with schools being opened next week? Just decree it.
Right.
And say that it shall be done. I mean, if you can violate the law on this side, why can't you do it on the other?
Yeah, I think he has come out and said that he'd like the schools to be reopened, and they should be, but he won't do anything about it because he's beholden to these unions. And well, one could now argue this might be a time to look at some of the power that these unions, whether it's the correctional law enforcement, prison guards union or the teachers union, maybe as citizens, maybe we don't want this much. Maybe it doesn't behoove us to have them have this kind of influence over policy. Do you know?
Well, there's a strong policy argument, and it'll be interesting to see if politically, because I believe the recall passed 1.4 million signatures in California as of I want to say yesterday, and 1.5 is needed. But you remember from when we talked with Randy on this show that they're going to go for more, so that if they get disqualified, they still have enough. As he gets closer to being recalled, he's going to have to understand the existential threat. Everybody has speculated that he'll beat the recall, but these are the same people who said the recall was doomed. Remember, those people are now saying he's going to beat it. This is what he's got to worry about: his left flank. Because as of right now, they keep trying to, the calculus, I guess, of his advisors is, oh, it's just a coup, it's the Trump people, it's all these right-wingers. The problem he's got is if the progressives decide, we've had enough of this guy too, and that is happening, by the way, when that starts to coalesce, he may find himself in an existential crisis here in this state.
I think his approval rating in, September or something was, 66%, and it's now 46%. So that can't all just be coming from QAnon whack jobs and MAGA wearing, MAGA hat wearers. All right, let me hit Geico. Do you rent your home? Well, you probably do one or the other. You want to make it easy to do a little bundling, take your automotive policy and bundle it up with your homeowners or your renter's insurance. Well, good thing, because Geico makes it easy. Go to geico.com, get a quote, see just how much you could save. It's Geico easy. So bundle and get it going with Geico. That is geico.com today. I don't know if you saw Bill Maher talking about the recall, but he very, with not a lot of gusto, said, leave Newsom alone. It's almost like someone blew a call in to Bill Maher from the Newsom office. I'll play it for you just so you can get
Please
your
do.
take. And then listen to Van Jones' hot take on what's behind the recall.
Don't do it. Don't do it. I have my frustrations with California. I've certainly been not shy about voicing them on this show. But Gavin Newsom, he's a smart guy. Yeah. He's a good guy. I would love to talk to him in a room and convince him of a few things. But please, don't do this. It's stupid.
It's a QAnon conspiracy to take over the state. That's all it is.
It's so easy to get.
QAnon
in a state of 40 million.
This QAnon, I wish this thing had been around 20 years ago. So if I ever got caught cheating, I could just go, it's a QAnon. Come on. Don't be naive. Or if my fucking boss caught me ripping off supplies, I could go, come on, this is QAnon. Come on. You really think I stole this copier toner? Come on. It's QAnon. Anything that ever I just get a fucking D- in high school, and I go, come on, Dad. Don't you believe the report card? That's a QAnon. Next time I get pulled over for drunk driving, I'm just going to tell the cop, you think I'm drunk, or is this some kind of QAnon thing going on here? Come on, wake up.
I'm going to tell you, this is why they don't understand what's happening here. Van Jones is famously from Oakland. The mayor of Oakland, I forget her name. She's a Loyola Law School graduate also. She's come out and said wonderful things about Newsom. He's safe in the Bay Area. What they don't understand is, as you said, QAnon, this is not a winning strategy. Let me just tell you, it's not going to win because Los Angeles has become so disenchanted with both our mayor and with our governor. Los Angeles is where he's got his existential threat coming from. And I will tell you, Bill Maher, I used to think the exact same thing. I used to think Gavin is a smart, good guy, businessman, blah, blah, blah. I used to think the exact same thing. I'd like to get into a room with him and say the same thing, but it's nonsense. I mean, it really is nonsense. I filed something yesterday in one of our lawsuits where I had offered to stipulate with the governor's lawyers, and this is now public because I just filed it. I offered to stipulate that he would just follow the law. That's all I asked for. Just stipulate that you'll follow the law, and I won't proceed further on this lawsuit. They wouldn't do it. They refuse. We don't admit that we're not following the law, but we won't stipulate that we will follow the law. They are so hunkered down in this kind of bubble that they're in that they don't understand it. You've got Van, who I know and like, who's from Oakland and is apparently drinking the Kool-Aid there. They got the mayor of Oakland who's also drinking the Kool-Aid. They have no idea what is happening in LA and how upset people are at the nonsense that he has been engaged in. And I just think that once you're on that kind of downward slope, it's very hard to get it back. When you talked about going from 66 to 49 or whether it's 62 to 49, all it will take is the right candidate to catch lightning in a bottle, because on the recall, once it's in my mind, it's going to qualify, and once it qualifies, there's two questions: do you recall? If so, who do we replace it with? If there's the right candidate there, I think he's delusional if he thinks that people aren't going to do it. People are going to do it. They're fed up and they understand. And Adam, by the way, you have hit on the two issues. Outdoor dining and schools are the tipping points for people across the spectrum. Those who are in one camp or the other don't understand that the independents in the middle are who decide these things.
All right. Possibly Falconer from San Diego may be a guy. San Diego seems to have had their done quite nicely with many of these issues, homelessness and COVID and business and all that. So that could be a viable alternative. Mark, if you're going to be in town for the Super Bowl, you can come on by the shop and watch it on a 14-foot screen if you're so inclined.
Fantastic. I should bring some to-go food.
Yeah, you're going to be around?
If I'm there, I'm there.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you off the air about your
Please
availability. All right. I'm going to be in February 26th, 27th, Oklahoma City, Bricktown Comedy Club doing stand-up. And then March 19th, 20th, Reno and Virginia Street Brew House. You go to amcroll.com for all the live shows and subscribe to the YouTube page and watch a bunch of free stand-up there. So what do you got, Mark?
We got Tenny's back open for outdoor dining, as is Engine Company 28. If you're in Palm Springs, stop by Elixir or Gigi's at the V. And if you're in New York, Prova at Grand Central Terminal and at the Moxie Hotel in Times Square. Come on by.
So, till next time, Adam Crow for Mark Garriga saying mahala.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.